Hi Nick, great, thank you. Thank you for having
Lovely
me.
to see you again.
Good to see you.
Um, let's start again. When you started that, like social entrepreneurship is now a term which is kind of is known.
hmm
How aware were you of what you were doing when you started out, and how much do you think you helped construct this term? I suppose.
Yeah, not really aware. There wasn't really many reference points for sort of social entrepreneurs or these kind of different business models of
Yeah.
social enterprise when I first started. And when we first set up Social Bite, it kind of all happened by accident, really. So it was a bit of an accidental journey when we effectively just opened up this little cafe in the centre of Edinburgh. It was a sort of coffee shop, sandwich shop.
Yes.
So this was back in 2012. And what happened was, originally when we opened this shop, it didn't have anything to do with the homelessness issue, which has now become quite well known for. How that came about was there was a young man who was 19 years old. He was homeless. He was selling the Big Issue magazine, and he was selling it just outside the front door of the cafe. His name was Pete, and we'd been open for about 2 weeks. And Pete wandered in after about 2 weeks, and he was kind of lingering around by the counter. Plucked up the courage, and he asked us if he could have a job, and we sort of thought, why not? It seemed a nice thing to do, and we gave him a job in our kitchen. And he basically was just working really hard. And when a full-time job opened up, we offered it to him. And then another job opened up, and we said, Pete, do you know anybody else that's homeless that might want a job? We'll maybe try it again. And he said, well, my brother, Joe, he's also selling the Big Issue.
Yeah.
So we gave his brother a job, and then another job opened up, and we said, oh, maybe you should try that guy down the road, John, he might be good. So we gave him a job, and kind of all stemmed from there.
But was there ever a aha moment, or was it always just like this just seems nice thing we're doing?
Well, I think at one stage we had about 4 people in the cafe from homeless backgrounds, and we were asking questions and how did you become homeless, and we got a bit more immersed in it, and we decided to introduce this kind of pay it forward system. So when customers were coming in, we started to say, look, we started to work with the local homeless population. Would you like to pay something forward? The homeless people could get something in advance, and customers start to say, okay, I'll take an extra sandwich or an extra coffee. So by the time we'd introduced the food provision, we started to invite homeless people in, and we were feeding maybe 40 or 50 people every day in this little cafe. So that kind of became the ethos, and then we really focused on this social enterprise business model, and we decided to take the shareholding out of the business. So we basically set up a parent charity and gifted 100% of the shares to the parent charity. So that was an interesting juncture in it because it took out of the decision-making process the kind of personal profit drive.
Yes.
And it made you, I suppose, more able to make certain decisions that would have been a bit unusual if you had a more traditional commercial business structure. Because the truth is, as you're expanding these social activities you're doing, there's a counterbalance with your kind of commercial objectives, and the more homeless people you're offering jobs to, they start to become a bit maybe less productive. Maybe they're going to take a while to rehabilitate into the working life and not be so reliable. So that has a cost. As you're giving out more food, then that has a cost in doing that. So you kind of having to balance your commercial and your social.
How for you personally, how was that kind of, did you go through the, I'm just putting the wrong word, but did you go through kind of the balance of working yourself through this whole thing of where I'm looking to go and what I'm looking to achieve?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we had to go through the balance of trying to find what was the right balance for us as a business, as a social enterprise. So we kind of settled on, we made it a policy around a quarter of the workforce would be people that struggled with homelessness.
And was that a finger in the air type?
It was kind of when we noticed when the balance was too many vulnerable people, it was much more difficult to run that business because, as I say, you've got a lot more complex challenges as part of the employment, and it's important for people to have others that they can kind of look up to or mentor them and get that mix right. So that was a bit of trial and error before that was about the right level. And similarly with the free food element, initially when we first introduced that, it was a sit-in service, so homeless people could sit in the cafe. But we found people were obviously dwelling for a long time, staying for a long time. And again, we thought this was great, the service was really working, but then we started to know our sales figures declining because ultimately customers, as much as they might want to support the cause, maybe felt more comfortable just going to Pret or Starbucks. So we changed the delivery of the food to basically being a takeaway service. People would come in at the same time, but it was a takeaway. We excluded the peak lunch rush between 12 and 2. And then we did some after hours events where people could come and sit in. So again, that was just a better balance, the kind of commercial and the social.
And how were you kind of, when you're setting your targets, not in terms of revenue or anything, but just in terms of what you're hoping to achieve,
Mm-hmm.
how long were your horizons at? Was it just like, okay, let's see what happens tomorrow? Or was it actually, well, this is what we hope to achieve over the next?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had one little cafe that was working really well, and we were managing to, deliver this kind of social impact, and it was popular with the local community in terms of customers coming in. So we thought, let's try and expand, basically. So we always probably only take things in maybe a 2-year horizon. It's never like been a great master plan from the beginning. It's always what twists and turns are next after each kind of juncture. But back at that juncture, we thought, let's try and expand and open a chain of cafes. But let's give Starbucks a run for their money in Scotland. And we managed to open up 5 cafes, 2 in Edinburgh, 2 in Glasgow, and 1 in Aberdeen. So that happened over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years, that expansion. And yeah, by this point, we're obviously become quite a large employer across those cafes, offering quite a lot of jobs to people, giving out quite a vast quantity of food. Pretty much no one would have ever really heard about us or known much about Social Bite, but we had a bit of a profile boost in 2015 where, somewhat spectably, as mad as it sounds, I wrote a letter to George Clooney and invited George Clooney to come to Edinburgh and visit our little cafe. And quite amazingly, in November 2015, he rocked up and kind of brought the whole city to a screeching standstill and kind of gave our little tiny social enterprise this massive profile. And from there, we've been able to really kind of build on the work we've been doing, and that was a big turning point.
And again, for you, and I appreciate that. I love the whole concept of, from when I first heard about kind of, I just write George Clooney a letter, but without probably thinking, okay, he's actually going to turn on. Were you prepared for it?
It's obviously one of them things that you're kind of at the eye of a media storm on that particular day, and I wasn't prepared for the fact that about 200 women arrived at the cafe at like 6 a.m, camping out basically to catch a glimpse of it. By the time we arrived at about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the scene outside the cafe was like the scene from the movie Notting Hill, where the guy opens his door and there's just like hundreds of paparazzi, there was news trucks, everything else. And I remember I went into the newsagent the next day, and it was the front page of every single national newspaper in the entirety of the UK. It was like one of the main news items on the BBC News at 6. Like it was like, boom, it was like George Clooney. And I have cousins that live in South Africa who phoned me up saying, I've seen you on the South African news with George Clooney. So, it was one of those bonkers things. Must have been a slow news day, really, because the story only really was George Clooney eats a sandwich. But yeah, so I don't think we were prepared for that. But as it's, like I said, a tiny little charity social enterprise, what an opportunity to build on, and kind of from there we got multiple fundraising opportunities. We suddenly had a louder voice around the issue of homelessness.
I suppose that's my question. It's like, it's happened to you, this amazing thing, which obviously snowballed to what it was.
Yeah.
But what was your thought process at the time in terms of, this is how I could best capitalise on this?
Well, I think like with any entrepreneur, you'll know yourself as an entrepreneur, like you're always thinking about the next step in your business. You're always thinking about opportunities, or where you want to take it next, or different avenues you want to take. I think what's interesting if you pursue a career in social entrepreneurship is you're just doing the exact same thing, but your brain's just calculating those considerations within the context of a social issue.
Yeah.
So for us, it was like, right, we are giving out food, we're giving jobs, but ultimately, if we want to really do something about this, we have to get into the issue of housing and trying to help people put a roof over their heads.
Yes.
So that kind of led us into thinking, how can we try and maybe create an accommodation project? And so that led to the Social Bite Village project, where we embarked on a project to basically take on some vacant land that was owned by Edinburgh City Council, and we put into production these 2-bedroom prefabricated homes. So it's a community that's been built there basically for people that are homeless. About 20 people at one time can live there. They live there for maybe between 1 and 2 years, and they get all the support they need and ultimately helped into their own kind of tenancy. So that was kind of when we decided on that as a vision. Then you have to kind of work back from that and think, how do we raise the money to do it? So that led to a few kind of big fundraising drives, most notably these big mass participation sleepouts that we started to embark on. Kind of just figuring out what's next in the journey.
So can I ask on that then?
Yeah.
It's like kind of just before we filmed this, you're doing some media work and stuff like that. So how do you balance up the fact that you're an entrepreneur, you're a business person, but also you have some public profile and you understand that you've got to utilise that public profile in order to get your message across and achieve what you want to achieve? How do you weigh up the balance and how do you deal with it all?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think since we had that George Clooney visit, and then we've had multiple other high-profile visits after that, including Leonardo DiCaprio, Prince Harry and Meghan then came the following year and stuff. So you start to notice, like I say, the power of the media, if you can harness it to advance, what we're trying to achieve with it, either from a fundraising perspective or a messaging perspective. Just like you said earlier this morning, the Home Secretary's just made some comments about homelessness being a lifestyle choice. So I was invited to speak on Radio 5 Live about that. So you have opportunities to really, I suppose, represent the voices of people that are pretty voiceless.
Yeah.
When you're working with homeless people, the number one thing that we heard when you asked people what's it like, the experience of being homeless, is typically that they said they felt invisible. They're just that people look right through them kind of thing, and they tend to not really have a voice when it comes to it. So I think, I tend to kind of enjoy and relish the more public profile element of it and the media side of it, and try and use that for best effect.
So one last question for you, Colin. Over the last few years, lots of people have been looking at their lifestyle choices and talking about purpose and talking about actually they want to achieve more.
Yeah.
Have you got kind of advice for these people who kind of are looking to take initial steps in terms of actually doing something which actually has more than just I'm working a job? How would they go about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I give talks to companies and talks, that's often the focus of it, is how, like you say, it's such a big focus these days for all kinds of sectors and companies, purpose, social responsibility, and it's something that's more than just a tick box kind of exercise. It's something that employees look for in the companies that they go to, and it's a really important priority these days. So, what I try and do is kind of share my story in doing so, draw out key lessons that are applicable from things that I've learned, regardless of what sector you're in or what stage in your career you are. So, there's different kind of lessons I'll try and share from my own journey that can hopefully give a bit of inspiration and encouragement for whether it's a company looking to embark on kind of that purpose journey, or whether it's individuals within that company, and just try and give a bit of inspiration through sharing my own journey.
Josh, thank you so much. Lovely.
My pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.